The phone starts ringing, and suddenly, your entire body reacts, like something bad is about to happen. You look at the screen. You know you should answer. It might take 20 seconds. Maybe less. But instead, you stare at it ringing, while your brain rapidly searches for reasons not to pick up. And when it finally stops, the relief feels almost embarrassing. People often assume this means you're antisocial, or rude, or emotionally distant. But for many people, phone calls feel strangely invasive in a way texts never do. Because a phone call demands something immediately. Your attention, your voice, your emotional presence. Right now, text messages give you space. Space to think. Space to edit yourself. Space to breathe before responding. Phone calls remove that space completely. And for people whose minds are already crowded, that sudden pressure can feel mentally overwhelming. Far faster than they know how to explain. You rehearse what you're going to say before making the call. Sometimes multiple times. You plan the greeting, the tone, the timing. Then the other person answers. And immediately says something unexpected. Now the script in your head collapses. Suddenly you're improvising socially in real time. Which is exactly the situation your brain was trying to avoid in the first place. Psychologists sometimes describe anxiety as an overestimation of emotional consequences. And phone calls create dozens of tiny uncertainties at once. Will there be awkward silence? Did my tone sound strange? Am I speaking too quickly? Did I interrupt them? Most people experience these thoughts occasionally. But people who hate phone calls often experience all of them simultaneously. Their brain treats a simple conversation like a performance being evaluated in real time. And exhausting performances are usually avoided. Sometimes the phone rings, and you let it ring out intentionally, while fully planning to call back later. But later becomes an hour, then evening, then suddenly replying feels awkward, because too much time has passed. So now the anxiety doubles. Not only do you have to make the call, you also have to explain why you disappeared. What makes this exhausting is that none of this looks dramatic from the outside. To everyone else, it's just a phone call. But internally, your brain is processing tone, timing, pauses, reactions, expectations, and self-awareness all at once. And people with highly active inner dialogue rarely experience conversations quietly. Even while speaking, part of their mind is still observing themselves from the outside. You've probably noticed something strange too. You can spend hours texting someone comfortably, then panic the second they ask, "Can I call you?" Because texting feels emotionally controllable. Phone calls don't. They move too fast. There's no delete button. No time to rearrange your thoughts into the version that sounds acceptable. Only immediate response. And for certain minds, that immediacy feels emotionally unsafe. A lot of people who avoid phone calls aren't actually afraid of conversation itself. They're afraid of unpredictability, the loss of preparation, the possibility of awkwardness they cannot edit afterward. which is why many of them sound perfectly confident in texts, but mentally exhausted during calls. Their nervous system prefers environments where thoughts can arrive slowly. Phone calls demand speed, and not every mind feels calm moving that quickly. So over time, avoiding calls becomes less about laziness and more about protecting mental energy. Not because the person doesn't care, but because some forms of communication feel heavier than they appear from the outside. And maybe that's important to understand, because people who hate phone calls are often described as distant, when in reality, many of them are simply overwhelmed by immediate emotional interaction. Their silence is rarely emptiness. Usually, it's overprocessing. So if you've ever stared at a ringing phone, waiting for it to stop, maybe you're not broken. Maybe your mind simply craves space before expression. And in a world that constantly demands instant responses, that kind of mind can become exhausted very quietly.